Don't ever say, no one loves me. No greater thing can one do than to lay down their life for another. We read in Hebrews 10:10, and by that will we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. Remember, Jesus didn't have to die. Would you give up your life for another person? Could you really? Would you die for your children? Oh, yes, I would. Nothing more painful than to have a child on a deathbed. Our second son, on the day that Ronald Reagan was inaugurated president, we were in Piqua, Ohio. Actually, Covington, Ohio, there. And we were watching television, and Matt had a little bit of a fever, my second son. And all of a sudden, it got really bad. Now, we just moved there. We hadn't been there very long. I wasn't even sure where the hospital was at in the next town. We had to go to the next town of Piqua, where we had to go to the hospital. And all of a sudden, Matt passed out. He had a seizure. We got in the car, and we got ready to get in the car, and he wouldn't breathe, and my wife tried everything, and I put my hands around him, and I prayed that the Lord would bring him back, and he started breathing again. People went, ooh, yeah, it really happened. We got to the hospital, and I must have drove as fast as that little car would drive, and I ran red lights, and I did everything. I swerved up and down the highway, drove erratic. From there, a policeman would stop me. Then I would, well, get out of the car. I said, Carla, when the policeman stops you for careless driving, I'm going to run over with David and say, to the hospital, please, my son's dying. We never found a police officer. And then we got to the hospital, and I pulled in a no parking, and I told the guy, tow my car, I don't care. He said, what's the matter? I said, my son is near death. He said, oh, okay, no problem. So we went in there, and he had a fever for several days. But during that time, if you would have asked my wife or myself, would you take that fever? Yes. And those who've had children know exactly what I'm talking about. Because of our love. Would I die for my second son? Yes, I would. Would I die for my children this day? Yes, I would. Would I die for my granddaughter? Yes, I would. Because of the love I have. Christ loves you so much that he died an agonizing death. If you want to know what crucifixion is about, it was the worst sacrifice ever. The Romans invented that form of punishment. For an instance, let's just try something. I want you to stand up. You stand up. I want you to stretch your arms out as far as you can, I think your neighbor. I want you to stretch them, and then stand on your toes. Okay, lift them up now like this. Are you breathing the same? Can you feel that in your breath? Okay, that's enough. I'm going to pass it out. Did you notice when you did that, though, what happens? You had to kind of take a breath like this. The agonizing crucifixion was difficulty breathing. Thirst was unbearable. Eventually, it was done away as a form of punishment, or death rather, because it was considered so inhumane. Jesus picked a time to come into this world to say, not only will I die, I will die the most horrible death. The scourging. Anybody see The Passion movie? I went with our staff, the two other ministers at Kemble, went with me at the time, our youth pastor and our associate pastor, visitation minister. And Reverend Light said, at one point he turned his head, he's a big, tough guy. He looked at me and said, and when they were scourging Jesus, he said, I can't take it anymore. Enough. And that's when I said, haven't they done enough to this man? It's a movie, but I'm thinking. We walked away from there, down to tears. I don't know how you reacted to it, but I thought, how could someone suffer this much? He should have died from the scourging, but he didn't. But he allowed himself to linger on. And don't believe any crazy talk that, well, this looked like a bad death because he was God, he didn't suffer. Jesus was fully God and fully human. And the fully human suffered an agonizing death. And we commemorate that sacrificial death. The greatest demonstration of love this world has ever seen. Point two is, communion is a time of what I call contemplation. Not only a time to remember what Jesus did, but to contemplate what it means to us. And what it means to us as Christians. And the source of strength it can be. May this communion service this morning be a reminder of what Christ has done for us, and what Christ can do through us, and what it means to be a Christian. Without the death of Christ, there's no hope. Anybody ever been to a revival meeting? The old-time revival meeting? We used to have in southwest Ohio. And they get and heat. I mean, real hot. And remember they put these two big tents together in this camp in Indiana. And we moved southwest Ohio, we just drove over the border. And this was this camp for a week. And this guy would preach. I don't know why they wore jackets. They would just get soaking wet. Eventually they'd take the jacket off, then they'd take the tie off. But they preached really hard. But I remember this one preacher got up there, Bob Taylor, if I remember him. And he said, do you know, he went down and he pointed this guy in the front row. Do you realize if the Lord hadn't died, you'd be in a devil's hell? What do you think about that? And I go, oh. Whoa, he said, you hear me? You'd be in a devil's hell. Now, I have to admit, it's not quite my style to scream at somebody and say you're going to burn in the devil's hell. And it might be a little better approach to how to present the gospel. But in that setting, it seemed to kind of get the point across. But the interesting part about it was that it made me think, though, that that's true. Without the death of Christ, there is no hope. For Christ provided a way, the perfect sacrifice. So contemplate in your heart, in your mind, how important the death and later resurrection of Christ is. Point 3 is communion is a time of identification. We identify with lots of